Hello and welcome to the Bonsai Show. I'm going to start with giving you another look at the Swiss Dragon. We featured this one right at the end of episode 5, just before the Bonsai Show live in Telford, where we took this tree really for public viewing as it was. We've spent 4 days wiring this tree. I say we, that's myself and our good friend Gus. And the aim really of this wiring is firstly to leave as much foliage on as we possibly can so that the tree can continue to build up energy from that. But secondly, to open it out so that we can get light in there, which will help with some of our extended goals with this tree. So what we're looking to do with this piece over the next year or two is to feed it well and water it sufficiently. We will wait for the new buds to extend and push out most likely quite a long candle and longer needles, and we'll be then looking to select those and take them off for back budding in the following year. But as we pointed out in last episode with the Hokkaido juniper, your timelines can change, but as it stands, that is the plan for the Swiss Dragon. Fully wired, slightly new front, slightly new angle. We'll retain the pot, the Gordon Duffet pot, which is what I learned whilst at Telford, so that's a bit more knowledge for the tree. But for now, this is it. And what we're actually going to do now is go to viewers' garden segment. It's another one that comes from the West Midlands area, with some quite mature trees in there for us to take a look at.
My workshop. And a collection of pots, Japanese, Duffet, and a few John Pitt. A mother and daughter white pine, they're ready for styling in the autumn. First styling of a Scots pine. One of my favourites, 3-trunk hornbeam. And then some Japanese trees here. White pine, juniper, and a juniper. A first styled Scots pine, actually from Spain. Again, a nice 3-trunk hornbeam. Quite a rare maple, Tsumigawa. It is a twin trunk. Going back to one of our English classics, a blackthorn, again twin trunk. Again quite a rare tree, a Forsythia. A mountain maple. Zelkova group, a Yamadori hornbeam collected in Croatia. Again, one of my favourites, first styling of a Portuguese oak. a very heavy crabapple, and finally 2 Japanese a white pine and a juniper.
So as always, we like to thank viewers who send in their trees or their gardens, and if you would like to participate, then feel free to send in yours. I'll include the email address down in the summary notes for this video. Our next job is to introduce the preparing and bending of branches. This is the tree that I've chosen. I'm not going to do a styling on this tree. Really, the video section is just about how we prepare this kind of branch to undertake a bend on there. So I'm not going to talk through all of this, and we'll condense that as part of the editing. What I will do is talk you through the part of the process, finish that off, and then come back and talk to you again. So the process that we're going to do, firstly, is to use a vet wrap, which we moved to using about a year ago. Previous to that, like most artists, we tended to use raffia. I have to say, it's become hard to get hold of good quality raffia, and it's also a bit of a faff. But this is our one primary material for wrapping and protecting branches, and the second one is a cotton tape. This I saw demonstrated at an event in Spain in January of this year, and we have used this technique on some of our material in the past to a great effect. But I think for this tree we'll stick with the vet wrap because it is nice and quick. So as I mentioned, we're going to put a bend into this branch. This one, which is also on the tree, is already dead, so we'll take that one off just to save us a bit of space, and hopefully we'll gin that afterwards, do something with it. So what we are going to do, and I've chosen this angle for the tree primarily as a styling design, but as I say, this isn't really about styling, but you should be able to get the gist and see a little bit better. So the vet wrap is not adhesive in its own right, it is more like Velcro and will stick to itself. So we'll start this process off by wrapping around this piece of material. And we put this on nice and tight and go up as far as we have to. There's a few branches to get this around on this particular tree. If we were actually doing a styling, we would have chosen branches and taken some off. But I think we will leave it at about this height in terms of the wrap. And we pull this nice and tight and allow it to stick to itself like that. So you see, it's nice and quick. Doesn't include some of the faff that you have with raffia. Now, on some branches, that may well be enough to protect the branch or the trunk from snapping as we apply more wire and put the bend in. I think for this branch, that probably would be enough. But what we'll do, just for the demonstration purpose, is show you the next step in putting parallel wires along this material and then putting another wrap over the top. And for some of those, I've already prepared and cut. This is a 3.5mm wire, and the idea is that we will run parallel and all the way down the lines that we want to bend, and we'll take one and run it off along this branch, the branch at the back. This one will run all the way to the top, and as we get up to near the top, we can use the wire to put a very quick bend just to start holding that piece of material. And what I'm also going to use on this occasion, because it's quicker, is insulation tape just to hold some of those in place while we do that. So we'll put 2 in on this run. Actually, it's that one. Okay, halfway through on putting these parallel wires in. So we've got 2 in. I put one quick run of tape just to hold those 2 in place. The one at the back here, if I turn the tree around, runs along and then goes down up this branch, and the other one goes all the way at the top and wraps around the very top piece. So I've got 2 more of those to put in before we get to the next stage. Okay, so we now have 4 wires that have been run along the length of this branch. I am going to put another quick layer of tape here, and this is just insulation tape, as I mentioned. I don't really think that I need to put more in. I think that's fine. You can see that the wires, we've wrapped around some of these branches as we've approached them. It's probably a little bit more visible from the back. They're not fully tight to the trunk stroke branch at the moment, but we'll start to wrap that and pull them in, and then we'll move on to the next stage. But for now, it's another layer of vet wrap around here, and I tried to go the opposite way for no real reason other than it's just the way I like to do it. So when you're applying this one, same as the last layer, it has to be nice and tight. What we don't want is those wires moving as we start to bend. And as I've already said, we may be going slightly overboard with this thickness that we're trying to bend, but you are far better off being safe than sorry. And if it's your first time, you want to make sure that you get it right. We'll cut this off. And there we go. Second layer of wrap that's been applied on the outside of those parallel wires that we've run along. So the next stage is a bit more typical, and that is to run at least one line of wire all the way along the branch or trunk that we are looking to bend. It's a bit better of an angle. So this is 6mm wire, that we're going to run the whole length of this piece. We'll then have a look to see whether one application is enough, or whether we need to double up that piece of wire. Getting there now. Okay, one application, 6mm wire over the top of the parallel 4mm wires that we placed inside. I will finish off these wires that we're running up and around the other branches, just so that we can bend them out the way. Have a little bit of a better view. Okay, so that is the trunk or branch prepared, and what we should now be able to do, hopefully by hand, is to move this branch to new locations. Experience will tell you when you've gone far enough. What I'm trying to do is twist in the direction that the wire is wrapped as we're bending, which allows that wire to tighten at the same time. The question is, how far do you want to go with this kind of bend? And as I say, we're not undertaking a styling video on this piece of material. It's more a demonstration of the technique of applying wires and then putting a bend in. So I think I am going to leave it at that stage. The branch, which was further out, more or less straight, has got some shape in. What we would do as part of a restyle is go on to wire out all of the other branches and make something of this material, but I think that's a job really for us to get on with rather than an extended piece for this episode. What we will go to is the Morten Albek interview from the Bonsai Show live. Again, very glad to have had him. Here's what he had to say.
My name is Morten Albek. I am growing bonsai, but mostly very small bonsai, shohin bonsai, so nothing above 20 centimeters, and that's a bit of a lie. I have different larger trees as well. Well, I actually started, but my main profession is as a photographer, but in my young days I was a gardener, but consumer gardening, potted plants for nurseries and for stores and like that. But I had a teacher that one night showed us off schedule how to repot a bonsai. Probably it was a really bad bonsai back then, I'm sure it was, but I was just drawn into it when I saw that bonsai. So I started buying a few books. There was literally absolutely no qualified books at that time, but I bought one, a red one. I think it was a UK lady who wrote it, I'm not sure anyway, but I bought it and had no time to do bonsai at that time at all. So I kept that book and bought some others and kept them for years before I could actually start bonsai. So I started back in, I think, 1993, getting my first trial and errors. The why is easy to explain because I had no mountains in my country, so I only had nursery material to get. So they were literally just small. If this should look like with a thick trunk and thing, it had to be small. And then I just fell in love with the tiny trees. And then slowly I just developed that interest into shohin bonsai and all that fascination about how to set them up in a proper display. And maybe most likely because I love to have different trees. When you grow large or huge trees, you have very few specimens that you can actually grow a really big trunk on, and it takes a long time. I just found it was easier going, and there was so many more species to work with. And I love both. I like junipers, pines, whatever, but I especially love when you can have flowering trees and fruit-bearing trees that play and display thing really is fascinating for me. Absolutely, because if you're not on top of watering, you lose a tree in a day. Because if you have a hot summer like we had this season, where we literally had no rain for 2.5 months, and it was hot and windy, and you just have to water 2 or 3 times a day. So if you have a day job, you really have to be on top of that. A larger tree with more volume and a bigger pot that is not heated up that fast can cope with a little more. But if you have small trees that are fragile to drought, you really have to know your watering regime. When I have my main profession, where I'm a photographer and covering news, that was deadlines all the time. I have to work fast, I have to deliver fast, I have to deliver on time. So having this interest and semi-professional career with bonsai where you just have to do things slowly, that is the most important lesson. That is what gives me the most. So when I go out watering, everything disappears from my mind. If I had any trouble or stress or anything like that, it disappears when I go out into the garden.
So, before we leave this episode, there are 1 or 2 jobs that I want to pass on to you. It's actually quite a nice day today. It's early November, but the biggest problem for us is that the trees, and we're surrounded by trees all around, they're losing the leaves now. We have some fairly big oak trees that are the main culprits. And what we need to do is, as well as picking them up as we go, and we like to turn them into leaf mould, for anyone that has water features, whether that's like us with just a big bowl, or whether you have ponds, it's actually necessary to cover them over so that you don't get those leaves falling into the water, decomposing and causing a problem. So this is our water bowl. We put it in earlier this year. We have one plant in there at the moment, an oxygenator that we'll be looking to grow on and add a few more and possibly a couple of fish. But all of the leaves that are now falling will cause us a problem going forward. This is a standard netting that's available from garden centres, nice and stretchy, and what we'll be looking to do is to place this over the top of the water feature. We'll weight the edges down with stones, and it will stop those leaves that fall from these trees and from our hedge, although hornbeam hang on to them for a bit longer than most. And then we'll look to remove the netting again in spring. I would just point out, although birds don't drink from this, if you do have water features that birds and wildlife rely on for a source of water, then you need to think about how you cover them over. But we're going to get on with this. I think that's it for this episode. So we'll see you back for the next one.